Hi, I'm Carol Selden, Beautification League co-president, along with Karen Hansen. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our February program. Thanks for zooming in to join us. Happy Groundhog Day. Now, there are conflicting views on Puxatawny Phil when he poked his furry head out today for the ceremonial prediction and whatever the name is of the groundhog at the Bronx Zoo. But no matter, early or late spring is coming. And today is a fine day to think about preparing for spring in our gardens. I think about it all winter and what's going to come next. We are delighted to welcome our guest speaker, Sean Corenki, manager of the Gardner Center in Darien. So now I'm pleased to turn the meeting over to Nancy Malling, who will introduce Sean.
Thank you, Carol, and good morning, members and friends of the New Canaan Beautification League. It is my pleasure to welcome our speaker, Sean Corenki. He's the general manager and buyer for the Gardner Center and Florist in Darien. As the leader of this second generation local business, he knows the ways to garden are always evolving. There's always something new to learn. As a self-described plant geek, Sean developed a love for gardening at a very early age. He enjoyed working with his dad in his vegetable garden and with his great-grandmother in her perennial garden. Later, Sean studied plant science at UConn and got his master's degree there as well. He has been working in the retail garden center business for 30 years. And during the 16 years he's managed the Gardner Center, Sean has developed a product line that focuses on more sustainable and responsible ways to garden. Recently, the nursery was awarded the Northeast Organic Farming Association's certification. That's no small feat. He advocates putting nature first. Sean knows the needs and wants of the experienced as well as the newbie gardener. He knows firsthand that every gardener needs more than gardening books and tools and plants. Everyone needs somebody to talk to, somebody who knows firsthand how to dig in the dirt. As manager of the nursery, he has developed a knowledgeable staff, and they are always ready to answer any questions. As we look at the piles of snow out there, it is hard to believe that spring is less than 6 weeks away. For some of us, it's time to browse our gardening books and plant catalogs. We dream of a colorful landscape. Never too soon. For many of our newer gardeners, this may be the time to wonder, where do I start? As with any endeavor, there's no dumb questions. I hope many of you will take the opportunity to type in your questions in the Q&A section on the bottom of your Zoom screen. Sean will be very happy to answer them all. Who better to guide us as we get the garden ready for spring? Welcome, Sean.
Thank you, Nancy. That was wonderful. I did want to correct you on one thing, though. You grabbed a bit of Chris Barker's bio there. I actually don't have a master's degree or an undergraduate degree in horticulture. Those belong to Chris Barker, the owner of the Gardner Center.
Oh, well.
I am very proud to tell all of you that I have not spent a single minute in a horticulture class in my entire life. I have absolutely no formal background in horticulture whatsoever, other than the fact that this is the only thing I've ever done since I was 21 years old. So I am 100% self-taught. And sometimes, not to knock Chris, but sometimes the self-taught is a little bit better than the book talk. Not every time, but sometimes. But I have to throw the degrees back to Chris because those don't belong to me. But thank you. That was a wonderful introduction, and I don't have to spend a lot of time at all talking about myself because I think you covered everything there. So thank you, Nancy. I want to thank you all for joining us today. I did want to ask a question, though. I had a question, if nothing else than for my own curiosity, but it also kind of helps to guide me as we go through our presentation as to where to linger a little longer and where maybe things to move a little faster through. I just really want you to kind of share what you think your experience level as a gardener is. I have a feeling we're going to have a lot of experienced gardeners in this group, which is great because even when I talk to experienced gardeners, I always get at least 2 or 3, wow, I never knew that. So even if you've been gardening for decades, I promise you're going to hear some things today that you're hearing for the first time. And I really, I like to share, again, we go back to that, the book learning and the experience learning. I have been selling and talking to people about plants for 30 years. It's all I've ever done. And I have seen and heard everything. And over the years, you have to, when you see something new, you have to figure it out. And, a lot of people over the years, and I joke all the time, a lot of people are like, wow, you're so smart, Sean. And truth be told, I'm really not that smart. I just have a really good memory. I have a really exceptional memory. And I hear something or see something once and I remember it for life, which is a good tool. It's a good tool to have. But before I get into our actual presentation, I wanted to tell a little bit of a story. It's not related directly to what we're going to be talking about today, but I was talking to the group before the meeting started this morning. We had a little dress rehearsal yesterday, and Patricia casually mentioned that they had 126 people signed up for this webinar, and I had to pretend that I didn't want to fall out of my chair when she said that, because that's a lot of people for 9:30 in the morning on a Wednesday in February. I've been talking to garden groups here at the store, in garden clubs and locations for almost 30 years. And there aren't a lot of gardening topics that generate an audience size of more than 100. If I talk about hydrangeas, that's usually a crowd pleaser, or pruning. But, this is really, for lack of a better word, shocking that there would be so many people interested in this topic right now. And I think I know part of the reason why, and it's kind of a story I want to share with you. And it's a story that most people outside of the green industry don't know. And I think it's an important story to know. And it's also a feel-good gardening story. So why not start the day with a feel-good gardening story? So, and we're going to be talking about March today. So this story's connection to March is the story actually begins in March. So this story begins in the March of 2022. Early March 2022, we were gearing up for a busy spring season like we had for 40 years already. And there was this new thing making its way into the headlines in the news rapidly called COVID-19. And from the beginning of March, it was a news item. And at the end of March, most of the country was shut down. It happened very quickly. And we are, a retail garden center. So when that started happening, we were filling up the store with inventory, and we were filling lots of live inventory. Our inventory in the spring is typically 70% green goods and 30% hard goods. And green goods are perishable items, just like produce. So as we got through the month of March, and the first day of spring was right there in the third week of March, and right about that time, the state of Connecticut decided they were going to close non-essential businesses, and we were considered a non-essential business. And we found out on Friday, I don't remember the specific date, but we found out on Friday that we, along with all the other garden centers and nurseries in Connecticut, were going to close for the 2 months during the stay-at-home order. It was devastating. Obviously, a store full of spring merchandise. It literally felt like the world was ending. Luckily, the Connecticut Nurserymen's and Landscape Association, which is a professional trade association that represents us and lobbies for us in Hartford, they literally spent the weekend up in Hartford and lobbied for garden centers and nurseries in Connecticut to remain open. And I literally found out late at night on that Monday, the day before we were supposed to close, that we were going to be able to remain open as an essential business. And we did. We found out, and collectively there was a sigh of relief that we were going to be able to remain open. But that feeling was fleeting, and we immediately went back to a sense of dread because there was a stay-at-home order. So our concern became, well, what if we have 40% less customers than last year? What if we have 80% less customers than last year? Our store was inventoried for a regular normal year with perishable goods. And we weren't really sure what to do. I had, truckloads of plants coming from California and Florida in the following weeks, and we weren't sure if people were going to shop. Long story short, by the second week of April, we knew we were going to be in for the wildest ride of our life. Everything that was not nailed down in the store was selling, from plants to fountains, from pottery, everything. And it wasn't just at the gardener center. This was happening at every single garden center in the country that was open and selling plants. It was absolute pandemonium. By the time we got to the middle of May, I probably ran out of geraniums, believe it or not, probably around the 15th of May. And I didn't see another geranium until the following year. I mean, everything just disappeared. We went through the entire month of June without a single bag of potting soil or topsoil or mulch. Everything was gone because of the consumer demand. And then the factories that made the bags were shut down, and it was a supply chain nightmare. Fast forward to the end of the year, end of 2020. 2020 turned out to be the best year we have had in the 15 years that I had been here. So talk about a turnaround. Of course, after 2020, at the beginning of this year, when Chris and I talked, we were well aware of the fact that the circumstances that happened in 2020 were not even a once in a lifetime circumstances. I mean, how often does the global economy shut down? We knew we were going to lose our audience's attention because 2021 was different. Schools were back in session, people were going back to work, the restaurants were open. We lost our audience's devoted and full attention. They had other distractions. So we weren't expecting 2021 to be even anywhere similar to 2020. So we set our sights back on 19, and we were hoping for 2021 to be like 2019. But guess what happened? 2021 turned out to be better than 2020, which was the best year we had in 15 or 16 years. And what that said to me, and not just for us, this was true for the entire garden and nursery industry in this country, in Europe, Australia. It was a global thing. And what it meant was the pandemic turned a whole bunch of people into gardeners, which was fantastic. But what was even better was once life got back to normal, they stuck around and they continued gardening. So if we could find one bright spot from a global pandemic, it really turned a lot of people into gardeners, and it really gave a lot of people, I think, a lifelong appreciation for nature. Many of these people who may not have had that before. So, I just wanted to share that with you guys because a lot of people don't realize how good the pandemic was for gardening and for I think ultimately in the end for the environment, with so many people who picked it up as a hobby and are sticking with it. So I just wanted to tell that little story. And now I'm going to talk about our talk, which we're calling Getting Your Garden Ready for Spring. This is basically a modified version of a talk I like to do called The March Garden. It's been changed a little bit for constraints of time, but what I'm really going to do, I'm going to talk about basically two areas. I'm going to talk about things you should be doing in the March Garden, and then I'm actually going to spend probably a little more time talking about things that you shouldn't be doing in the month of March. Gardeners get ridiculously excited in the month of March, especially if we have a couple of days to go over 60 in a row. And sometimes we have to curb people's enthusiasm a little bit. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about things that you should wait until later to do as opposed to March. And if any of you have seen my videos before, there's a couple of things I tend to harp on. I talk about the weather a lot. I talk about frost dates a lot. So I am going to talk. First of all, I'm going to frame this as the March Garden and things we should be doing in the March Garden. But I got to tell you, March is my least favorite month of the entire year. And you would think for a guy who sells plants for a living, the opposite would be true. But March is very different from the other 11 months of the year in that it's very unpredictable as far as weather goes. We all have a general idea of what the weather is going to be like in September or what the weather is like in June or January. But March is very unpredictable. And when you're trying to get ready for a plant selling season, the weather is everything. My great grandmother, who I used to help with her perennials, we've all heard March in like a lion, out like a lamb. I have seen March come in like a lion and go out like a lion many times. It's a cute idea that it goes out like a lamb every year, but it doesn't always work that way. So on the subject of the weather in March, I like to, as far as horticulture goes, I like to look at the seasons a little differently than the calendar seasons or the astronomical seasons. If you guys have ever heard the weathermen talk about meteorological seasons, I like meteorological seasons better when we're talking about horticulture versus the astronomical seasons. Astronomical seasons, of course, are based on the Earth's position in relation to the sun, and meteorological seasons are based on average high and low temperatures over a historical period. So in my meteorological horticulture weather world, March, April, and May is spring, June, July, and August is summer, September, October, November is the fall, and December, January, and February is winter. And I'll be honest with you, when I was a kid, and I still remember this to this day, it always bothered me as a kid that it was still fall 4 days before Christmas. So I like December, January, and February being winter. That way, they're the whole Christmas season. It's winter, and it makes a lot more sense in relation to horticulture, because horticulture is all about weather. It dictates what you can plant. It dictates when you can plant it, based on hardiness zones and first and last frost dates. And I'm actually going to start there. Has nothing to do with getting your garden ready, but it's one of those things that you just have to have nailed into your head and you have to be aware of. And it's something that people struggle with every year for a couple different reasons. So our growing season, or anyone's growing season for that matter, is the period of time between our last frost in the spring and our first frost in the fall. That's our growing season. As you go further north, it's shorter. As you go south, it's a longer period of time. Even right here where we're gardening, the Gardener Center here on the Post Road in Darien, our growing season is usually 7 to 10 days longer than any of you folks who may be living north of the Merritt Parkway up in New Canaan. Just based on our geographic location, it's a little warmer here by the sound. So that growing season is important. So first frost in the fall to last frost in the spring, and then last frost in the spring, first frost in the fall. That's your growing season. And here, our average last frost on the shoreline in Connecticut is May 15th. So that's the date you want to keep in mind if you're dealing with frost sensitive plants. Now there's some outliers. You have pansies in the spring and mums in the fall, things that grow outside of that growing season. But most of your plants, your tomatoes, your summer annuals, your impatiens, begonias, if you like to put your house plants out in the summertime, you want to wait until after that last frost date. And the important word is average last frost date. That means we can get our last frost on May 5th one year, but we may get our last frost on May 20th the following year. So it's average. So I always try to, I sell plants, but there's so many times I have to talk people out of things. People will come in here in the first week of April as soon as we have a 75-degree day looking for tomatoes. And I have to spend a lot of time explaining to people that you want to wait until the trees at least have leaves on them before you even start thinking about tomatoes. So that frost date is really important, and the United States Department of Agriculture changes it every 10 years. They keep track of that, and it's if you garden outside, you should know when that is. And so our first, and I love, if you've seen my videos, I love holidays for points of reference. So our last frost date typically falls around Mother's Day weekend. And our first frost in the fall is almost always right around Halloween. It's usually the week leading up to Halloween or the week after. Easy to remember that way, but you want to monitor the weather because like I said, it's an average and it does change. So that's what dictates your growing season, and that's really what it's all about. You don't really gain anything by starting too early. So just wanted to talk about that first, and now I'm going to go into some things that we can be doing in the March garden, because obviously we can't do them in the February garden. But March being the first month of spring. Now, remember, I talk about meteorological season, so that means we only have about 3.5 weeks until winter's over, which is fantastic. So, but March, again, it's a funny month. We can have a snowless March in easy time to work in the garden, or we can get, I've seen 18, 24-inch snowstorms in the middle of March and the March before. So March really, it's tough. But things that we can be doing in the March garden, and none of these are glamorous things. This isn't like going out in June with a cup of coffee to deadhead the roses in the morning. We don't get to have that kind of fun until later. But some things that we can be doing. So cleanup. Obviously, cleanup is always a good thing. This could be, it could be raking leaves. It can be, a lot of people, if you have early bulbs to come up, it's a good time to start pulling leaves off things. It's also a great time to cut back plants that you may have left over the winter. Now, when I talk about cutting back plants, I'm talking about a lot of herbaceous perennials. Herbaceous perennials are perennials that die back to the ground every year, come back the following year. The treatment with them had always been for years. It was always wait till we got a couple of hard freezes in the fall, cut them 2 or 3 inches above the ground, rake your leaves over them for the winter, and you're good to go for the following year. Over the years, especially the past 10 years, there's been a changing thought about doing that, especially if any of you guys are gardening for insects or for pollinators or native insects, beneficial insects. A lot of insects overwinter in perennial plants, in their stems, in the leaf debris, things that are around. And I mean, if you think about it, whether it's an adult insect that overwinters as an adult, or if it's an insect that lays its eggs for the following year, nature's smart and amazing, and they know to be around plants that they like, so that when the eggs hatch in the spring, or when the insect comes out of hibernation, they're going to be in an area where there's plants that they already like. The trouble with cutting them back in the fall is you end up sending a lot of native and beneficial insects to the landfill. What happens to them there is anyone's guess, but you really want to keep them in your yard. So the thought process has really been to, if you have a place in your yard where you can keep your perennials, especially if you're dealing with natives, if you can keep your perennials intact all winter, and then, when I talk about cleaning up in the spring, resist the urge to, even if you leave them up for the winter, resist the urge to cut them down too soon in March, because a lot of those insects, although they're gonna come out of hibernation or hatch while the weather's still relatively cool, you really wanna, if you go through the effort of leaving them for the winter, don't cut them too soon in March. Leave them till the end of March or beginning of April. And I know it's tough depending on where you have perennial plants in your yard, because they're not particularly attractive in the wintertime. But if they're in your backyard or your side yard, leave them until, do the bugs a favor and leave them until the first week of April or so. So try to skip the cutting down of the perennials as a cleanup in March. But you can definitely do raking and mulching. Mulching, again, not very exciting, but you can put mulch down in March before it gets too hot. That's always a nice time to do that. It's also the time to do soil preparation for vegetable gardens or even perennials or native plants. If you're adding compost to your vegetable garden, that takes time to break down. So getting that in the garden in March is going to give you some time to let that break down. And also on those perennial beds that we're not cutting back because we're going to let the bugs stay. It's a great time to use a compost around a mulch as a mulch around your perennials. Perennials, especially the native ones, if you're doing any native plants, perennials really don't like a lot of fertilizer input from us. They really like to be lightly fed. If you overfeed perennials, they tend to get stretchy and lanky. So if you want to feed your perennials, I like to use compost around them just to mulch and let that kind of work its way in. Beautiful thing about compost too, as opposed to the fertilizer, is the compost is actually going to improve the soil composition, whereas most of your fertilizers are just going to kind of run through the root zone and disappear. So it's a great time to be doing composting as a mulch around perennials and shrubs. It's also a great time to amend your vegetable beds if you grow vegetables at home. It's this is a good one here. So, and I know we have a lot of experienced gardeners here, but pruning, I could talk for hours about pruning, but I'm going to just kind of go over the general gist of it. Typically, shrubs that bloom in the spring, think about things like azaleas, rhododendrons, mountain laurels, andromedas, things like that. Plants that bloom early, they set their flowers the year before. And if you think about it, you know, a lot of the like azaleas and rhodies, they flower before they start to grow. So their flowers were already there. Their flowers were there going into the winter and just waiting for the spring to open. So any of your spring blooming shrubs, you don't want to prune in the fall, in the winter, or in the spring before they bloom, because you're going to be cutting the flowers off. So those guys, you always wait until after they bloom, and then you cut them back. But you also have to leave them time to develop flowers for next year. So you don't want to wait too long to cut your azaleas and your, they're two most popular. You don't want to wait too long to cut your azaleas and rhodies back, because if you cut them back too late, you're going to inhibit their flowers for the following year. So don't cut your flowering shrubs in early spring. And when you do prune them right after they flower, you want to make sure you have that done again with the holidays. You want to make sure you have your spring flowering shrubs pruned by the 4th of July at the latest. That'll give them time to set flowers in for the following year. What you do want to prune in March, you can have at this all you want. If you have summer flowering shrubs, things like spireas, butterfly bushes, some hydrangeas. I don't want to get, we could talk for days about hydrangeas. I don't want to get too bogged down with hydrangea pruning in this talk. But any of your summer flowering shrubs, things that flower after mid to late June, those, in roses for sure. Any of those guys, they all flower on new growth, and they benefit from being pruned. If you didn't do it in the fall, you can certainly go in and do it in March. That is a great time to go in and prune things like that. It's so much easier to do and to see what you're doing before they have foliage, and you also have a lot less debris to get rid of after you cut them back. So it's just I love cutting things back when they don't have leaves on them. It just makes life a lot easier. March is also a good time to remove protection that you have on plants. A lot of people make the mistake of leaving that on too long. I see a lot of houses in Fairfield County where obviously there's lots of beautiful boxwood plantings in the foundation planting, and a lot of people will wrap them in burlap in the fall and to keep them, they tend to burn in the winter. You know, plant guys are entitled to opinions as well, and an unpopular opinion that I have is that boxwood should remain south of the Mason-Dixon line, because I hate driving around and seeing these beautiful homes with all these beautiful boxwood in their yard, but I see these I call them boxwood sausages that I see in everyone's yards during the winter time. So I think they belong in the south, and I think there's better plants for here. But if you do wrap your boxwoods up, don't leave them on too long. The same thing goes if you have, maybe you're growing a Chicago hardy fig or marginally hardy plants in your yard. a lot of people will leave the protection on too long. And you're really protecting them from the coldest part of the winter. Usually once we get to the second week of March, the coldest part of the winter is in our rear view mirror. So you can start taking protection off at that time. If you leave it on too long, as the days get warmer, it's going to make it artificially warmer under the burlap where your fig tree or your boxwoods are. And it actually may cause them to grow sooner than they would if they were just out and left to their own devices. So you want to make sure you get that protection off once the worst part of the winter is over, but don't leave it on to the point where they're going to start growing underneath the burlap, because then when you take it off, as soon as we get a freeze or a frosty night, all that new growth that was immature is going to get fried, and you're gonna have a mess there. Another one. So this is one that we really have to kind of pump the brakes for people every year. Is a great thing, that not necessarily in the garden, but a great thing to be doing in the month of March is seed starting. Everybody wants to start their tomato seeds in January, and it's not the right time of year to start your tomato seeds. It's way too early. Your vegetable seeds, for the most part, your tomatoes, your peppers, your eggplant, things like that, they typically take 6 to 8 weeks. And most of your perennials that you're going to do from seed, if you do flowers from seed, most of your perennials are going to be in that 6 to 8 week window as well. So you really, and again, that first frost date, or last frost date that we talked about earlier, May 15th, you want to time your seed starting with that date. So if we're planning on putting the tomatoes out on May 15th, you should really be starting them, no sooner than March 15th. I have people that have already started their tomato plants. They get overgrown and they get too big. So you really want to kind of again, curb your enthusiasm with the seeds and wait until mid-March. All seeds have different times that it takes from the time you plug the seed till the time it's ready to go out. So you want to make sure you read that on the seed packet, how long it's going to take, and then time it with that May 15th, May 20th last frost date for your frost sensitive plants. Another good one here. So this one on the subject of people starting seeds too early. So one of the very first things we see in the springtime are pansies. Pansies probably make people happier than anything. I mean, they're just a riot of colors, and we just go from February to pansies. And pansies are famous for their cold tolerance, and they're very cold tolerant, and that's why we see them so early in the spring. Usually, depending on March, usually mid to late March. I see them often in February here in Connecticut, which makes me sad. Something to know about pansies is, I mentioned that they are cold tolerant, which means they'll tolerate frost, and they'll tolerate temperatures below freezing, but they don't like it. It's not going to help them at all. And really, if you plant your pansies when it's still going below freezing every night, they're really not going to do anything. They're actually going to kind of get forced into like a dormancy, and they're just going to sit there. And freezing temperatures also damage flowers. So pansies are something, get them in March and plant them. They're better waited till April 1st. I like wait until April Fool's Day for pansies. But you got to watch the weather. And again, with the weather, everybody either has a weather app on their phone or has a nice weather website they go to. When we get into the spring and we're talking about putting plants out, but we're still worrying about freezing temperatures like the pansies are fine down. The pansies will survive down to 26, 28 degrees without an issue. Same thing goes with like tulips, daffodils, hyacinths. You often see them at the same time, but they don't want to spend hours below freezing. That's when things get damaged. But what happens in the springtime, and this is why you want to have a good weather app or a weather website you trust, is you can go into the hourly forecast. So, I have all sorts of plants here that I have to worry about in the springtime because we have a beautiful greenhouse, but my greenhouse doesn't have walls. There's no heat. So whatever the temperature is outside, that's the temperature under my greenhouse. And I spend many sleepless nights with my weather app looking at hourly temperatures. Because if you check the weather forecast and it says, okay, well, it's going to be 55 today and it's going to be 32 tonight, you might say, oh, well, 32 is a problem because I have these plants outside. But what's really critical in the springtime is not that it's going to be 32 degrees, but how long is it going to be 32 degrees? As far as the plants are concerned, there's a big difference between it going to 32 degrees at 2 a.m. and staying at 32 degrees till 7 a.m. versus the temperature dipping down to 32 at 5 a.m. and then being back up to 36 at 7 a.m. A world of difference. That's the difference between what am I going to do? I have all these plants outside and letting things be. So have a weather app that you trust. And when you do if you have sensitive plants out in the spring, always look at the hourly temperature and see how long a sub-freezing temperature is the duration of the sub-freezing temperature is going to be. So if you really want to get a jump on things and not worry about temperatures, I would push you in early March in the direction of hellebores. If you guys don't know what hellebores are, I'm sure probably most of you do. Hellebores are absolutely fine outside. They'll go down to 15 degrees and stay that way for hours. And as soon as they thaw out, they'll perk right back up. So hellebores are a great choice if you really want to get something in your planters early. So fertilizers in March. If you're using, and I'm gonna, not that we like talking about them, but I'm also gonna include lawns in this conversation. If you're fertilizing lawns or shrubs or perennials with organic fertilizers, March is the time to do that. March is a good time to do organic fertilizers. It is because they take time to break down. They're typically, like if you guys are familiar with the holly tones or the garden tones, plant tones, any of the tones, they're all made of animal byproducts. So it's dry manure, it's feather meal, it's alfalfa meal, blood meal, things like that that take time to break down. So that's a great thing to get down in March. So that way it's getting into the roots and available to the plants when they come out of dormancy. Synthetic fertilizers, if you're doing like any of the blue juices, if you're doing any of like a 5-10-10 or 10-10-10, the granular chemical synthetic kinds, don't waste your time with them in March because they're water soluble. They're going to dissolve right into the soil and run right through the plant's root zone before they're even awake to use it. So that you want to synthetic fertilizers, and there's a time and a place for them. But synthetic fertilizers are really for once plants are awake and growing. So organic fertilizers on the lawn in March, synthetic fertilizers wait till April for sure. It is also, everybody loves hydrangeas. I spend more time talking about hydrangeas to people than any other thing, hands down. It's a big topic. Everybody loves them. There's so many kinds. Pruning is complicated. You can change their colors with the pH of the soil on some of them, but not all of them. But anyways, if you do have big, beautiful blue hydrangeas and you want them to be bluer, March is the month to add soil acidifier to your hydrangeas. A lot of people run in June when they're not blue enough to add a soil acidifier, and that's too late. That's something you really need to work on early because again, it takes some time to break down. And use sulfur, organic sulfur to change the pH for your hydrangeas to make it more acidic. Don't use, a lot of times I see aluminum sulfate for sale, which works really well, but you can use too much of that and kill the plant. So, and aluminum sulfate also tends to accumulate in the soil over the years and becomes somewhat toxic. So always use garden sulfur for making your hydrangea soil more acidic, for sure. So we talked about a couple of things not to do. Hold off on the pansies. Another one, and this is my goes back to my great grandmother again. You know, my great grandmother always used to plant peas at St. Patrick's Day. I think St. Patrick's Day is early for peas for us here. I like to wait again, April Fool's Day, April 1st for peas here. And, you know, the same goes for cold weather vegetables, you know, and it's like the pansies. The cold weather vegetables will tolerate below freezing temperatures, but it doesn't mean they want to be exposed to cold temperatures night after night after night, especially sub-freezing temperatures. They're not going to do anything, and it's just, you know, it's just going to hurt and potentially just stunt them. And then when it does warm up enough for them to grow, they're going to take some time to come out of that because they were subjected to such cold times. So cold weather vegetables, yes, but they're best for April. Best for April. And lettuce, it drives me crazy. I see lettuce offered all the time with cold weather vegetables, like with things like cabbage and Brussels sprouts and kale. And lettuce does not have nearly the cold tolerance that those other brassicas have. Lettuce does not like to freeze at all, and it often turns to mush, especially, you know, in the springtime. In the fall, if you plant lettuce in September and the plants have time to grow and kind of acclimate to lower temperatures, they can handle freeze and frost in the fall. But in the springtime, when they're little baby plants and you're putting them outside, they just freeze solid and keel over. So again, lettuce is even mid to late April, for sure. Another one on this is the main one that we have to like stop people with every year, and I don't like talking about lawns, but that's a thing that happens a lot. Is people love to put their grass seed down in March, and the trouble with that is putting your grass seed down in March isn't any different than putting it down today. Grass seed does not care at all about the air temperature. Grass seed will not germinate until the soil temperature is 55 degrees. And it takes a long time for our soil to reach 55 degrees here in Connecticut in the springtime. The soil has been frozen all winter, and especially this year. And it's going to take more than a couple of 70-degree days to get that soil temperature up to 55. So you can put grass seed down in March. It's going to take weeks to germinate. If the rain doesn't wash it away, migratory birds are going to come and eat it all, I promise. So there's really no point in putting grass seed down in March. You really want to wait until mid to late April to do that, honestly. Then it'll germinate in 10 to 14 days. You can put it down in March and it's going to take 2 months to germinate. And like I said, it's more than likely going to disappear before we get there, before the soil gets to the temperature that we want it to be. So this was just a rough framing of things you can and can't do in the garden in March. Obviously, I encourage everyone to get out in the yard and enjoy their time. Like I said, March is fickle. It goes either way. Some years it's snowless and warm, and it kind of tends to set the pace for the entire spring season. If March is snowless and kind of warm, spring season gets kind of spread out nice over a few months. I really like that. If March is cold and snowy, the traffic gets just extra heavy later on. So these were just some thoughts I wanted to share with you on this, getting our gardens ready for March. I would encourage you all, if you haven't been to our store before, it's a great place, right on the Post Road in Darien. We are very passionate about responsible gardening. We sell a lot of organic products here. We are not necessarily an organic garden center. We do have inorganic remedies and solutions here. Any of you who are in the pollinator pathway program and pledged not to use chemical insecticides, pesticides, fertilizers on your lawn, unless it's an emergency or dire situation. We're on the same page there. We have a couple of products here that are used for emergencies, but 9 out of 10 of our customers leave here with an organic product. Again, not an organic garden center, but we are responsible gardening is our motto here. And we have a very limited number of organic insecticides, and staff knows which one to use for this and which one to use for that. We do not sell, if you see a bottle of something, an insecticide for sale, and it says this product kills over 300 insects, you don't need that product. Because what you should be doing as a responsible gardener, and we can help you, get there, is you should know what your problem is, and then use the correct product to get rid of that problem. We shouldn't be wiping out the entire ecosystem because we have aphids on our petunias. So, that's what we're all about here. We really are all about and passionate about making sure people make responsible gardening decisions. I would encourage you all to visit our website, gardenercenter.com or gogcf.com. You could link up with our Instagram, our Facebook there. We do a video series here. I do about 80% of them. Joy does house plants, and then Jamie, our floral director, does some floral demonstrations throughout the year. We have 2 years of them already, and they're all archived on our website. We also have a newsletter that you can sign up for there once we start doing our videos to come out every week on Friday. Usually a little newsletter and our video of the week. It's always fresh content. I don't do any reruns. Even if it's a topic I've talked about in the past, I always do them from scratch. We have a great time doing them. And we also have a very robust e-commerce segment on our website that you can take a peek at what we have here for sale. During the season, you will see things like our hydrangea collection and our peony collection and our clematis collection. And you'll see pictures of the plants that we actually have here in the store and with live inventory. And so you know exactly what we have. We don't sell a lot of plants on the website, but it's a nice tool to save a person a trip in the car or a phone call. You can just kind of take a browse. And what I'd really encourage you to do right now is we have every single house plant in our stores on our website right now. And we have some really rare and exotic and cool house plants here. And they're all on our website. So if you want to check us out at gardenercenter.com and check out our houseplant section, I'll give you a pretty good idea of the depth of our tropical plants. So I really want to thank the New Canaan Beautification League for having me today, and thank all of you for tuning in. Thank you so much.
Sean, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well done.
Thank you much.
Well done. Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And Nancy, I know you've been monitoring the questions. So
Yes, I am.
there you go.
I'm back. All right. We have had quite a few excellent questions and some very excellent comments. The most recent one just came right this minute, really helpful.
All right.
One of our members, a very active member, said the Gardner Center was her refuge during the COVID crisis. I thought you might like to know that.
So I have had more than one person over the past year approach me with tears in their eyes to let me know that they had really used this as a special place during the lockdown and during the COVID year, for sure. Yeah.
All right. I'm looking for the question. There's so many here. Okay. I know that you don't want to go into great detail here, but this is a question that overrides a lot of people's questions. In other words, it's the peak question.
It's about hydrangeas.
It's about hydrangeas, you bet. I pruned hydrangeas and didn't get flowers on my bushes. What am I doing wrong? Thank you.
Yep. So Hydrangeas were always a super complicated subject. There are the mop head hydrangeas, and the mop head hydrangeas are the blue ones, the ones you typically think about when you see on Cape Cod and Nantucket, Eastern Long Island. They're the ones that people associate with shore. Typically blue ones. They used to be easy because those hydrangeas only flowered on previous season's growth. So that means stems that grow this year produce flowers next year. The problem that those hydrangeas ran into was twofold. Number one, everybody's landscapers would come in the fall and cut them down to the ground because they look terrible when we get a frost in the fall, because the leaves don't turn pretty colors and fall off. They just turn to black mush and then hang on the plants. So people's landscapers and homeowners were always inclined to cut them down to the ground. But when you did that, you were cutting off all of your flowers the following year. So the trick with them had always been to leave them, don't touch them, because you're going to cut off. And then after they're flowering in the summer, you could go through and lightly prune them. But the rule there was to never really cut them to the ground unless it became a problem in size, in which case you do a rejuvenational pruning and you take the whole thing down, miss your flowers for a year, and then start over. Then in 2004, Bailey Nurseries out in Minnesota kind of revolutionized the hydrangea world, and they introduced the endless summer hydrangea. And the endless summer hydrangea, it was fantastic because it bloomed on both new and old growth. So you can cut the endless summer hydrangea down to nothing every year, and it's still going to flower. So of course, that for the last 20 years, now that the hydrangea thing was already complicated, but now we have to determine whether they have an endless summer hydrangea or if it's an old Nico blue or an old Teller's blue, one of the old ones. So it got more complicated. What I tell people now is if you have hydrangeas in your yard that are blue or pink, a mop head hydrangea, and it was planted in the last 15 years, there's a 99% chance it's either an endless summer hydrangea or it is a other brand of reblooming hydrangea. As soon as endless summer came out, all of those old school hydrangeas kind of fell to the wayside. So they're gone, but typically hydrangea not blooming is wrong pruning. The other issue with them not blooming, especially the endless summers, is often too much shade. Hydrangeas, mop head hydrangeas, in a perfect world, they should be in the sun from sunrise till around 11:30, 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and then in the shade for the rest of the day. They hate the sun in the summertime. You could stand there with a hose on them all day and they're still going to wilt. So a lot of times if you put them in too shady of a spot, they won't bloom either. The nice thing about the hydrangeas is, mop heads notwithstanding, if you have a hydrangea that's white, you can prune those anytime you want, because the PG hydrangeas and the Annabelle hydrangeas all flower on new growth only. So you can cut those guys anytime you want, but the mop heads, you gotta, usually less is better with those guys.
Okay, the other question that I think is relevant to quite a few people is, what suggestions do you have to replace boxwoods, since the boxwoods have been attacked with the
Boxwood blight.
yes, they've been attacked, and now we want to replace them. What would you suggest?
So I would, and you know, there's a lot of boxwoods that are being introduced now that are resistant to the boxwood blight, but I think they've become such a liability at this point. I would steer clear of them altogether. Growers on the West Coast aren't even allowed to ship boxwoods east of the Mississippi anymore, and that was a huge industry for them, but they're just not allowed to even ship them here anymore. There's some people who say the Japanese boxwoods are more resistant, but there's no immunity there. So if you're going to go through the trouble of replacing your boxwoods, I would replace them with something that isn't a boxwood. And where I would really encourage people to look is, a lot of people may be familiar with Ilex glabra, which are the inkberry hollies, and a lot of people don't. It's a native plant. It's actually native to Connecticut. A lot of people don't like the inkberry hollies because they have a tendency to get open on the bottom as they grow. Even if you prune them, they kind of get bare and you can see underneath them. There's two new ones that came out about 3 or 4 years ago. One is called Gembox and one is called Strongbox. And these are both cultivars of Ilex glabra, our native inkberry holly. They have been bred to be small and compact. They only grow about 3 feet tall, 3 feet wide. Their leaves are about half the size of the regular inkberry holly, so it reads more like a boxwood does. You're never going to get that same look as you would get from a boxwood, if you're standing 3 feet away from it. But if you're standing 15 feet away or 20 feet away, or the view from the street, it's going to look just like boxwoods in your landscape. So that's, inkberry holly, Strongbox and Gembox would be my best suggestions. And they're really, they're great because they're tolerant of shade, they'll take sun, they'll do dry, they'll do wet, and they're incredibly salt tolerant as well, which of course boxwoods aren't. And because the inkberries are native to Connecticut, you do not have to wrap them up in burlap for 4 or 5 months of the winter like so many people do. So that's another nice feature of those guys.
Here's a question I think that many of us have to deal with. How can you get rid of the invasive plants like garlic mustard or invasive perennials? When do you start working on them?
It really depends on which one we're talking about, but if we're talking about Japanese knotweed and things like that, Phragmites, if you have big areas of that, the best way, there's really no simple solution. It's a lot of, it's really a physical removal situation, and the best solution really is to cut them down as close to the ground as you can, especially if it's a big area. Heavy cardboard goes on top of the stems you leave behind, or it could be black plastic, and then 3 or 4 inches of mulch goes on top of the plastic or the cardboard. Basically creates a situation called solarization, where they're getting super hot and super warm in there, and you're kind of depriving them from light and from air, and if you use plastic, from water. So that's really the best way to get rid of them on a large scale if they're in a big area. If they're in amongst valuable plants or ornamental plants, it's really just an issue of going in and physically removing them. Unfortunately, there isn't. If there was a spray where you can spray on your plants that would only kill the plant you didn't want there, we'd sell millions of those. But unfortunately, there aren't any pesticides that are selective enough that they can go in and just pick out the plants that you want to kill any herbicides. So it's just really physical removal, unfortunately.
Another question that relates to what you were speaking about. If you don't have your own compost pile, where do you get compost? Our town has wonderful compost at Waveney, but some people have experienced weed seeds in the local compost. So what would you suggest?
So local compost is tough. There is such a science involved with producing compost, and especially producing compost that does not contain weed seeds, because it really, for compost to happen successfully and for it to not be anaerobic or rancid and for it to not have weed seeds in it, it has to reach a certain temperature. There's a certain temperature that it has to reach, and it has to reach that temperature, and then it has to stay at that temperature for quite a while. And it's not put into ovens. These are temperatures that the compost generates naturally as it's breaking down. I've had the ability and pleasure to visit the Coast of Maine facility in Maine, where we get all of our compost products from, and they have when I tell you a team of scientists and lab coats working on their compost piles, I'm not kidding. And I guarantee you there aren't any scientists in the municipalities that are making their compost, for sure, because every town that does compost has weed seeds in it. It is what it is. It's a nice inexpensive way to get compost, but it's one of those things that it's kind of one of those you get what you pay for kind of situations. If you want to make sure you don't have weed seeds, you'd want to buy a packaged product where the weeds have been heated out for sure.
From compost, we're going to go to mulch. Would you suggest that a mulch like sweet peat, or do you think there are better alternatives?
So I like mulches like sweet peat for a lot of reasons. Most mulches are decorative, and they serve a decorative purpose, and then they serve a purpose to retain moisture, and they serve a purpose to suppress weeds. They don't bring anything to the party as far as nutrition to the plants or improving the soil at all. And a lot of wood mulches will actually create an acidic reaction in the soil, which is great if you're growing azaleas and rhododendrons. It's like an acidic soil, but not so great for vegetables and perennials. So non-wood mulches like sweet peat is fantastic because that actually breaks down and turns into soil. So it actually improves the soil texture and the composition, and it adds nutrients to the soil. I have a product here. We don't do sweet peat here anymore. I used to, but I found one that I like better, which is from the coast of Maine called Fundy Blend, which is made from kelp from up in Maine. So it's a kelp mulch. So again, and it's got a little bit of composted bark in it, so it's a nice dark color. But it lasts a season, but it slowly breaks down and it adds nutrients and, more importantly, micronutrients to your soil as it's breaking down, as opposed to just sitting there and looking pretty. So it actually adds, nutritional value to the soil.
This question just came. How is it best to remove large areas of Pachysandra that's also mixed in with poison ivy? How do you deal with that?
So you would do the same exact thing that I just talked about with the like with the Japanese knotweed and the mustard. Just lay sheets of cardboard down over it. Pile, and Pachysandra is not knotweed, so it's not nearly as aggressive. It's not going to take as much to knock the Pachysandra out. If you put cardboard or plastic over the Pachysandra and then threw 3 or 4 inches of mulch on that, and left it there for 2 or 3 months, your Pachysandra would be gone after that, especially if you timed it in the summertime when it's hot, where you can just let it kind of bake under there. But that's a great way, and really the only way, to get rid of Pachysandra, which is something we should be. I don't want to, again, plant guys have opinions, but Pachysandra is something we should be working on getting rid of. I know it's pretty, but it's like the vinyl siding of ground covers for me.
Does that also kill the poison ivy? When you pick up that cardboard, are we going to see the poison ivy is dead too?
Poison ivy will be long gone as well. Absolutely. But that's a nice organic way to do that without having to dump, herbicides all over the ground to get rid of it.
This is a question that is going to have more significance as time goes along. One of our best gardeners has asked, how do you get rid of Asian jumping worms?
I don't know that they have a solution for the Asian jumping worms yet. The problem there, again, would be physical removal of them. The other issue is using things like really terrible grub control products like Dilox, something like that. I know a lot of people with jumping worms have found success with the diatomaceous earth. Diatomaceous earth is little plankton skeletons. It's basically like little pieces of glass. And a lot of times that can be, and it's an organic product, and that can be kind of incorporated into the soil where the jumping worms are. And what it does is, as they move through it, it not only lacerates their skin, but it kind of gets stuck to them, and it causes them, I don't want to sound gruesome, but they kind of bleed to death and dehydrate from crawling around through the diatomaceous earth. It's a great product to use for slugs, for organic too. But the jumping worms are a relatively new thing here, and I haven't seen a whole lot about getting rid of them.
Just to balance out the question about compost, we've gotten some people who want to chime in and tell the newer gardeners in our area, specifically in New Canaan, that our town does its own composting, and they do the best they can do with what they've got. And that's located at the transfer station in New Canaan, sometimes known as the dump.
Yep.
And they do as good as it gets. And there's also a service in our town called curbside compost, which I have never heard of, but I'm glad to hear about it. We'll pick up your compost materials and deliver your compost. And they do high composting that you have mentioned. So I wanted to just add that to people's knowledge base in our community. This is a question about just one up here. Maybe we're getting. Everybody wanted to know about the pollinator pathway as well, and what the date of that was for that celebration. It's April 23rd. Correct me if I'm incorrect. When do you suggest planting for peas directly in the ground?
So peas directly in the ground. So like I said earlier, my grandmother always said it was St. Patrick's Day, but I think St. Patrick's Day is better if you're down maybe in southern New Jersey and south. I like April 1st here better. Peas like cool weather, but again, if we're having night after night after night of sub-freezing temperatures, that they don't like. They'll tolerate a dip below freezing, but we really want to wait till April for the peas, for sure. And they grow fast. Usually you get them in April, you're usually done with your pea harvest by the middle of June, and then you can do them again, plant them again in the middle of August for the fall.
This is a beginner's question, but I don't think it's strictly for beginners at all. How much should you cut back your summer flowering shrubs like roses? Just how far back should you go?
So I usually like to say 2/3, a half to 2/3. More is always better. When you cut something back, you're encouraging lateral shoots. Usually the thicker stems are at the bottom. So the further you cut back, those new shoots are going to come out of thicker, sturdier stems. If you prune them back too high, that new growth is going to kind of break at the thinner stems, and you may end up with floppiness. So I always like 2/3. Cut them back 2/3 of the way. Yeah, if your rose bush is 3 feet tall, cut it back to 12 inches. That sort of thing.
If somebody's interested in a specific product like Profusion zinnias,
yes,
does your website address what products you have like that? And we have a specific question. Will you be getting Profusion zinnias light pink this spring?
So I carry the whole Profusion zinnia series. The website does, although we'll have perennials and shrubs and houseplants on the website, the annual inventory is too fluid for us to have on our website. Things come in and go out quickly, and that changes day to day. And most of the trees and shrubs and perennials I order in advance. The annuals I order day to day. That's a daily thing I'll call, and I say I need more of this, more of that. So that's really a seat of your pants sort of thing. But as far as the Profusion zinnias, I would either reach out to me directly at my email, Sean@gocf.com. I think I've already gotten an email about the Profusion zinnias. But reach out to me in that first or second week of May, right around the time we'd be starting to do the summer annuals. And then I'll be able to give you a call when they come in. If we do that now, by the time we get to May, I'm going to forget all about you. I have a million people that want to call me when certain things come in. It's easier. It's easy in the moment to do it, but trying to keep track of it months out is little time consuming. I'd need an assistant for sure if I started performing that service. But yeah, just reach out to me at the beginning of May, and I can even put some aside for you.
Okay. This is a play on what we had just discussed, but when do you cut those rose bushes?
So the rose bushes, because they flower in the summer, you can cut them back in the fall. You can cut them back in the winter or late winter, early spring, like we were just talking about. A couple pros and cons to either way. A reason to cut them back in the fall might be so that if we get heavy snow or ice, a lot of times plants will bend and break, which is a nice reason to cut them back in the fall. The case against that would be if we cut them back to a foot tall and then we have a very severely cold, snowless winter, and the winter kills them another 10 inches down. So I typically like to wait until spring or late winter, spring to do that, just in case there is any winter dieback.
One more question about getting rid of those invasives. Does using the regular, if you want to kill the regular ivy, does the cardboard mulching with the mulch work in that particular plant? English ivy.
The cardboard plastic mulch technique will work on any plant. That will work on any plant. Depending on the type of plant, you may have to leave it longer. Some plants you may have to leave it, like the knotweed and things like that. Phragmites, the ones that grow in the swamp and in the wet areas, those you often have to leave it in place for a year. But English ivy, Pachysandra, things like that, I think 3 or 4 months would probably do the trick, especially if it was during the summer.
Well, thank you very much, Sean. I really appreciate it. And I think now we're going to go to Karen Hansen.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure.
Well, thank you very much, Sean. We really learned a lot from you. We gave us a lot to think about. You mentioned March often. And as you said, it's a fickle month. So we have to think about when we're going to do our composting and fertilizing and pruning. As you said, you never know if it's going to be cold or not cold. And so I learned about grass seed too, that you need 55 degrees. So I think we've learned an awful lot from you, and thank you so much.
That's great. Thank you.
And also thank you everybody for participating. I think we had about 100 people, and I'm sure you learned too, everybody that was here. Then I'm going to move on to our next program date. And that's going to be on March 2 at 9:30, a Wednesday. And it's going to be with Linda Larson, and she's from Arizona. And she's traveled the world and visited over 900 gardens. And she's eager to share her love of these gardens with us and her travels. So that's about it for today. Just have a happy Valentine's Day too. That's coming up before.
Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you.